Welcome once again to this special edition of The Russell Brown Show. In this episode, I'm going to talk about a brand new script called Dr. Brown's 123 process. Yes, this script is brand new and is actually designed to replace an earlier script called Dr. Brown's 123 JPEG. This is new, it's expanded, it's incredible. Let's get going. Now, of course, to load this script, it's easy and quick. Use Dr. Brown's Easy Installer, which can be found on www.russellbrown.com or on the fine CD from which you may be watching this movie. Now, of course, Dr. Brown's 123 process will process JPEG images, TIFF images, camera raw images, or PSD images. It will take any of these and process them into the other. Now, of course, Dr. Brown's 123 process has been installed. Here from within the bridge, I can target a set of images, in this case, some camera raw images. Let's select 2 of these images. Now, I of course could select hundreds of images at one time, but for this demonstration, I'm going to select 2 images. Once those images are selected, let's go up here to the Tool menu and down to Dr. Brown's Services 1.5 and over here to Dr. Brown's 123 process. Now, if I select this and open it up, the dialog will appear here inside of Photoshop, but the images are coming from the bridge. Now, this is one way of opening up this dialog. I'm going to cancel for a moment. Then here from within Photoshop, I can also show you that you can go over here to the File menu, down to Scripts, and you can also access Dr. Brown's 123 process. Now, for those of you who had earlier installed 123 JPEG, you may also see that script here. But it is best to use this new script because of its expanded capabilities. I can select the script here from within Photoshop. The key difference is that you are allowed to select a unique folder in which to process that you select here in step number 1, and when you select images from the bridge, it automatically selects only the images you have selected. So that's the difference. Notice that you can also select Include All Subfolders within the selected folder. That's new. I'm going to cancel that, go back to Bridge, and our images are still selected, because I prefer this technique. Then up here from the Tools menu, down to Dr. Brown's Services, and over here to 123 Process. Now, you saw this dialog earlier, and you were amazed how complicated it looked. But it's not so complicated because it's extremely powerful. Now, my users have come to me, and they've told me things like, "We're looking for more power." Or they've said things like, I want more control. I took both of those together and brought you the features found here in 123 process. Let's go through the basics. To begin with, if you are a current user of the image processor, then stop this movie right now and you can just use this immediately because the theory and the way you use it is pretty much the same. But if you're curious for new features, then listen more to this movie. Because typically you start here, of course, with step number 1. The images are automatically selected for you from the bridge. Step number 2, you decide where you're going to save them. In the same location, or clicking here to select a folder as I'm doing now. And in this case, I'm going to select the desktop, just like that. But what's this? Save in subfolder right here. So I can save the results from the 3 different versions of files which are exported into subfolders. If this box is checked right here, then you cast your eyes down to step number 3. You notice that the subfolder name can be set here. So you have the ability to set the subfolder names for each of the 3 different versions or file types you're exporting. Now, since we're talking about step number 3, let's check this out. You can now change the different file types for each of the different exported files. In this case, I have PSD, TIFF, and JPEG images selected for my 3 different file types. But let's go through this first one and set it all up. As you can see, I can just click and hold here on this flyout menu and select JPEG, TIFF, or PSD. Of course, if I selected JPEG for all 3 of my file types, I could get 3 different flavors of JPEG. But in this case, I want a PSD file, a TIFF file, and a JPEG file as part of my project. Next, in this case, I want to select the output profile. It currently is set to the default of same as source. That means whatever source comes in is the same source that goes out. But you can determine and select different output profiles. And of course, here you can select untagged, which would then export an untagged file with no profile attached. In this particular project, I want to select my working RGB, which of course in this case is Adobe RGB. I'm going to select it just like that. Next, I want to run an action attached to this unique file type. This is new. In the past, you had the ability to run an action on all of the file types. In this case, I can now run a unique action for each of these. But once I've selected run action, I can then move down here and select the action itself. In this case, I'm going to select an action I created earlier. And over here, I might want to select this action number 1 right there. But check this out. Right here, I can select whether the action runs after the image resize or before the image resize. Now you're saying to yourself, why is this important? Well, if you were running an action that sharpened your image, you might logically want to run that after you resize the image and not before. But there are special situations and unique actions that may have to be run first or before the image processing. So you now have the control to choose this. In this case, let's assume I'm going to be sharpening this image, so I'm going to select to run this after. Now, this would also assume that I'm going to resize the image. Let's move over here and click on Resize to Fit. Now it's called Resize to Fit because it's using the Fit Image command in Photoshop to process these images. It's doing this because you want to process horizontals and verticals in the same way. Keeping that in mind, I'm going to discuss a feature that you may want to avoid. If, for example, I set my measurements over here to inches, and by the way, you can see that you can choose a variety of different increments. I'm choosing inches, and I want to process a series of horizontal and vertical images. And I want the horizontal and verticals to be the same proportions and size. You'd think if I wanted a 6-inch width by a 4-inch height that I might put in 6 by 4, but you'd be wrong. When you use the Fit Image command, instead you want to set this to 6 for the width and 6 for the height, so you have this imaginary square frame in which the horizontal and vertical images will be processed, and thus they'll be the same proportions. Now, of course, you can also set the resolution. Let's set that up here, just like this. And our first set of images looks pretty good. We could then follow through and do the same for my TIFF image or my PSD image. And of course, if I wanted a set of only PSD images, I could merely set this and toggle this to look like this. But for this first test, let's run and process one of each, just like this. I'm going to leave all those other settings the way they are for our first process, but of course I could change them. Now, if this was a typical setup that I used for a particular client, you can of course go over here and save these settings. So we could put in Russell's settings right here and save it to a particular location, and then later on, if we wanted to recover all of these settings, we would merely select the load button. Okay, we're almost ready to click the run button. Now you're saying to yourself, are there any bugs? or as Dr. Brown likes to refer to them as features. Yes, there are a few of these features to watch out for. Don't name your folders or your files with unusual characters, or there will be a processing error. Also, if you have very complex actions that you're running, you may want to go into your preferences, as you see here, and adjust the preferences for the history states to something greater than 20. I'm going to recommend 60. If you do have problems, then adjust your history state. If you're not having trouble with your current action sets within Dr. Brown's 123 process, then don't change it. Leave your history states at 20. Okay, on with our story. So we have this all set up. We now click Run. It will now then take these two selected images. These happen to be camera raw images, and of course we know that you can pre-process those images ahead of time, and then it will use the properties within the camera raw settings to process these images. All of these images will be sent to the desktop as we saw before and placed into those unique folders. Looks like we're done. Okay, now what I'm going to do next is go over here to Photoshop, and let's hide Photoshop, and let's hide the bridge, and here we are on our desktop. So here are our three folders right here: set 1, set 2, and set 3. Let's take a peek inside and see that our two images here, our PSD images here in set number 1. Our JPEG images are here inside of set number 2. And of course our TIFF images are here inside of set number 3. So there you have it. The basics to using 123 process from Dr. Brown. If you want to know some more advanced super user ways to use Dr. Brown's 123 process, check out the next movie in my series on using this, called Advanced 123 Process. Give it a try the next time you're processing a lot of images and you want to do it fast, efficiently, and creatively.